This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop. I'm the ICG committee member who's responsible for running our webinar programme. Oh dear. Hang on a second, I've skipped a slide. There we go. Right, so for today's webinar, we're delighted to welcome Rich Clark from MR, Qual and Deepr. Rich is also a valued ICG member. Richard has over 25 years of market research experience from both client and agency sides. Beginning his career at J. Walter Thompson, he then specialised in online research, both Qual and Quant. He has run many projects around the world and provided training for the MRS. In 2019, he created the Deepr online hybrid Qual-Quant methodology. In his webinar today, Rich will take us through what Qual-Quant research really is, the various platforms currently on the market, and how this can fit into your research armoury. As usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end of Rich's presentation, so please, when we come to that, switch on your webcams and raise your hand if you have a question, or if you prefer to remain anonymous, please type your question in the chat box and I'll read them out after the raised hand. So we're really grateful to FaceFacts for sponsoring this webinar. FaceFacts is an award-winning quantitative and qualitative specialist offering fieldwork services across a vast array of research methodologies. They provide project support, recruitment, scripting, data collection and outputs. Founded by hardworking female business owners, FaceFacts offers clients an unbelievable level of customer service, communication and project ownership. You can be assured your data is in safe hands as they gain certification and have effectively implemented ISO 27001 since 2017. So if you're searching for an experienced, trusted, dynamic and highly enthusiastic fieldwork partner with a combined 50+ years experience in the owners alone, please don't hesitate to get in touch with FaceFacts Research. Before I hand over to Rich, here are some more events and webinars you may be interested in. Please visit our ICG website for more information. And don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £120 for a lot of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more. So our speaker today is Richard Clark, and I will now hand over to Richard, if I can find him on the list. So over to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you. I can't share my screen yet.
Oh, is there a pop-up that's come up?
No, it's still just saying to share, ask the organizer to make you presenter.
Oh, okay, I'll try again. Lucy, I'm going to have to ask you to do it because I think I clicked on Rachel instead of Richard, and I can't make him presenter. Lucy?
Is there anything I need to do, Sally? This is Rachel, if you've made me.
Now, could you hover in the people list? Can you see your name and Richard's below that?
Yep.
Can you hover on Richard's name? You should see a downward arrow, and then you get a drop box with possibility of making Richard a presenter. Click on that.
Yeah.
I think I've done it.
Wonderful, thank you.
No worries.
Fantastic. Apologies for that, everyone. Over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you, Rachel. Hopefully you can all see my screen okay and see the first slide. So the rise of hybrid Qual-Quant research. what is it and what is its future? And as Sally said, the reason I'm talking about it, having had a sort of long career in mainly online quant, but some online qual as well, is that a couple of 2 or 3 years ago, we almost by accident created this methodology, tried it out, and it worked. So since then, we've run this with a number of clients, and I thought it would be useful to go through and explain how it works, what it is, etc. So as Sally said, we'll do this in 3 parts: what it really is, how you can do it, so platforms and services, and then how it can fit into your research armory. And I'm also going to sort of include why bother, really. What's the purpose, what's the benefit to you, to your clients, etc. So first of all, if we look what it is. Sorry, there's lots of text on this, but the other slides are not like this. This is really just the meat of it in terms of going through the details of how it works. So I keep being told by marketing people that I shouldn't explain it in the way that I do, because it makes it sound less sort of intriguing and glamorous. But I think the simplest and easiest way to understand it is to think of it in terms of an online survey, but with more open-ended questions than you would usually have, fewer closed questions, with probing and with prompting, and with enhanced software that can control the pace at which the interviews are administered or questionnaires are completed, and which can engage with respondents or participants. So if I just run down this list, the interview process is controlled or assisted. You could say administered. So it's like almost like the olden days of administered interview. Well, not the olden days, but the days of administered interviews rather than self-administered online interviews. So controlled or assisted by software and can include probing, which I'll explain. Recruitment and interviewing are streamlined into one process. So you don't necessarily recruit and then interview, let's say, the following week. It's all part of one process. People prospective participants begin a questionnaire, and then they may be screened out if they don't meet the criteria, or they may be quoted out as well if we already have enough completes from certain types, certain genders, ages, etc. So sample is usually sourced. I say usually because we can use traditional recruiters or client lists, but usually we source from accredited panels, so quant panels, and that means that we've got sample available all over the world instantly, pretty much. AI can be incorporated, particularly for the analysis side of things, although to me, it's not central, it's not critical, it's certainly not critical to the way that Deepr works. And again, I'll explain that. So questions and answers are posted in writing, like an online survey, and participants do not see each other's answers. So this is not appropriate, of course, for group discussion and that sort of research where you might think of doing groups rather than depths. Stimulus materials can be shown, and participants can be asked to upload images or videos or even other types of file, and you may need to offer an extra incentive to do this. Interviews are typically from 10 minutes in length to 30 minutes. You might say that with 10 minutes it's difficult to ensure that people are properly engaged and immersed in the subject by then, but actually we found they can be within the first 2 or 3 minutes if we design, or questionnaires are designed in a certain way. And also interviews can go on longer. We've certainly run interviews which have gone to 40 minutes or even longer, but it depends really on the subject and the questions, because of course there's no actual interviewer there. It's all run by software. Sample sizes can be from tens to hundreds, so that could be tens. You might have 10 in one country, 10 in another, 10 in another, etc. That could all be in the same language or different languages, right through to hundreds. So this can be really sort of quant with a little bit of qual in it. In other words, quant with a small number of open-endeds, but using the methodology of time controls, engagement, prompting, and probing. And then participants' contact details can be collected for follow-up qual. So in a sense, you can use this as a recruitment tool. So you can use this just to cast your net over a very broad range of people and then decide who you want to do follow-up qual with. Not everybody will agree to do follow-up qual, but most people will. So, of course, one of the main questions is using panels, and not to criticize panels, but this question does come up. Using panels, how do you make sure that you get really good quality people? There's no recruiter involved to vet people beforehand. So how do you get people straight off a panel and to engage and to give good quality answers? Well, there are various ways that we can do that, partly the panels that we work with, and mainly through the questionnaire design and then quality controls as well. And when you do this, when you find the good quality participants from panels, and there are plenty of them, this is an example of the kinds of answers that you can get. So this is something we did. It was not for Tesco. We just used Tesco as an example. The reason we did that is that we noticed that the Tesco Christmas ad in 2021 caused a great deal of upset, or as in there were a lot of complaints to the ASA. And so we thought, we wondered whether we could use this method to get feedback on the advert. And so we created a few questions. We just ran a study off our own back. And this is just an example of the kinds of answers that we got. So you've got in here the first example of bottom right, a negative answer. So some of these answers were positive, some were negative, and they did actually identify that some people were very upset with the advert showing the Father Christmas with a vaccine passport. So I'll just show you another example. So this is the same study, just a different question. So in this particular study, we didn't go into a great deal of depth, but we just got one or two sentences on a wide range of questions that we were asking. Just to explain about probing, the way that probing works is we don't use AI. We use a technique whereby our software can read or recognize the presence or absence of certain words or terms or phrases within participants' answers. And then the presence or absence of those words or terms or phrases can trigger the showing of a particular follow-up question. So if a particular word is in there, in somebody's answers, they will see a certain follow-up question. This can be made quite complicated because it can be that if a certain word is present and if they meet certain other criteria from different questions, they can be shown a follow-up. And similarly, the absence of something can be, absence of a word can lead to a different follow-up. And this can all get very complex. We can also do probing in the sense that if someone says, someone's answer is, I'm not sure, I don't know, I don't know what to say, etc., then we can rephrase the question potentially with prompts or with a few example answers. This is an example where we went into a bit more detail. This was on a pack testing study or a packaging research study. And in this case, you can see the answers were a bit longer because we gave people more time. We asked more of them. We expected more of them in terms of the level of detail. And again, we did actually do probing on this. If certain words were present in some of these answers, then these people saw follow-up questions and they gave answers of similar length. We haven't, by the way, just sort of cherry-picked the longest answers here. There are plenty of other answers that are of equal length from this study. So providers. So this chart, actually, I've got to thank Mike Stevens, ICG member from Insight Platforms, for mentioning these. This may not be exhaustive, but these are some of the platforms that you might want to look at. So most of these, in fact, all of them, apart from Deepr in the bottom right, are essentially software platforms that you can use yourselves. And Deepr is a service. So we are a fieldwork provider or a field and tab, as opposed to a software platform that you go and use yourselves. So we'll just go through these quite quickly. So Next Intelligence, this is the home page. And I'm showing you this really to show that this is real. This is not just me and Deepr coming up with something that nobody else has thought about. There are all these platforms are heavily financed and quite sophisticated in terms of what they can do. So conversational AI insight platform, Remesh, so remesh.ai, qualitative insights at quantitative scale for concept testing, and the words concept testing, those flip round to packaging design, etc., etc. So a number of different terms that they use in there, and they emphasize that it's live and hundreds of people at the same time. Again, talking about AI, analyzing responses, etc. Group solver. So this says, understand what your audience thinks of your product. Again, product will be substituted with other words, but the future of online surveys is real-time qual and quant insights. Again, mentioning AI and crowd intelligence. And Suzy.com. So put the voice of the consumer at your fingertips, faster, consumer-centric, and then at the bottom right, qual plus quant plus audience, all within one integrated system. So as I mentioned, these are all heavily financed, large-scale platforms. And then you have Deepr. If you go on the Deepr website, you'll see the homepage has changed slightly, but essentially that's the difference between us and the platforms, is that we are more of a traditional fieldwork service. In other words, you can design your questionnaire, we can help you or do it for you, but the model would typically be, in this case, with ICG members, that you would design your questionnaire, we would program it, you would check it, we would then do essentially the recruitment and the interviewing and give you back the results. So we think that the fieldwork service gives lots of advantages in terms of control and flexibility, access to the raw data, ability to change the questionnaire after the soft launch, and various other advantages. And this is just really to show, I'm showing this because this is what clients say they like. This comes from one of our studies, but I imagine it could equally come from software platforms. So essentially you get a combination of quant and qual. So if we were preparing results, we might do something along these lines of bar charts and word clouds and quotations directly lifted straight from the study in participants' own words. So how hybrid Qual-Quant can fit into your armory? In fact, I'm just going to go to the next one and then come back to that. So these are quotes that we've had from various companies when we were setting this up and working out where it would fit and what uses it would have. And essentially, it comes down to when you need speed, when you'd like numbers, when you don't have time to do traditional Qual-Quant, or potentially the budget to do traditional Qual-Quant. You may have disputes internally or disagreements internally about which product name to go with, which pack designs, what front of pack messaging, concepts, communications, etc., etc. So these are some of the examples of the kind of situation in which some clients have said that they would use this. So I'm just going to go back one. So where it can fit into your research armory, so fast turnaround and or lower budget UK or international projects instead of traditional qual or quant. So this can potentially give you a methodology where traditional qual and quant may not fit the bill or fit the bill as well as this can do. So fast turnaround, an example would be a project that we did where we were briefed and commissioned on Thursday, given the questionnaire on Friday morning. We programmed it by Friday afternoon. The client had tested it Friday evening. We'd gone to soft launch Friday evening as well. The client then actually looked at the results Friday night, gave us the go-ahead to do full launch, and we then went ahead with full interviewing over the weekend. So we had late Friday night, Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday morning we had completed all the interviewing. That was 30 interviews, and that was over 3 different countries, albeit that they were all in English, so we didn't have any translation. So we could get 30 interviews completed over a weekend, essentially. In fact, given the availability of panels, we could have done far more. So you could potentially do hundreds of interviews overnight, not that you'd want to necessarily, because you'd want to have a chance to clean the data and have a look through and take your time and get different people who are available at different times of the week and times of day, etc., etc. But that's the kind of speed, literally within days, because you don't recruit in advance. You do that within the interviewing process. International as well. So we did this international within a few days, but even if there were different languages, that can also be done because the panels are sitting there with people ready and willing to take part in research. So the way we would typically do a multi-language study would be that we would script in English, that would be signed off, then either we or the client would get the translation done. We'd program that would be seen by the client. They would then sign that off. Then we go to soft launch. Soft launch is actually really important in this because then the client can also check that participants have understood, or respondents understood, the questions in the way that was intended and they've answered in the way that was intended. If not, then questions can be slightly rephrased, can even then go to another soft launch. And that way you can make sure that before the main interviews are done, the questionnaire is working in exactly the way that you want it to work. And all the nuances of language are coming through as well. So this does give you an option for very, very fast and low cost to the client turnaround. You still have to design the questionnaire, which takes as long as designing any other questionnaire or discussion guide, and you still have to analyze the results. And so, of course, that takes time, as much time as any other study. Particularly if you've got a large sample size, you might say that you've got quite a few open-ended questions and quite a large number of participants. That can be got over by using various techniques. We use 2-stage techniques, or the nth method, in other words, whereby after a certain number of completes, we can then only ask every nth person to answer certain open-ended questions. So there are techniques that we can use to make sure you're not swamped with verbatims when you don't need to be, when you've already got the messages and enough verbatims. It can also be used following qual instead of traditional quant to add more color, insight, substance to the results. So in other words, you would do quant, but just like you would normally do quant after qual, but this time having a few open-ended. So asking what people like or dislike about competing packs. You can use that for example, on pack design, use that information. And so this is like quant, except that the open-ended answers will be fuller and richer and can include probing, which you wouldn't normally get in standard quant. And also you can use it as a recruitment tool for qual, as we described earlier, in order to help identify who to do qual with and then to provide the sample. In fact, my example with Tesco, I actually contacted Tesco out of the blue and said that our ad testing would have picked up the problem with the people who were upset by the vaccine passport held by Father Christmas, and they came back to us very quickly. And essentially what we were saying is we could have done this with a very wide range of people, and that would have found that one group of people you needed to do potentially follow-up qual with were those people who were very, vaccine hesitant or anti-vax, however you want to describe them. So that's a use for this as a way of identifying key markets. We've had a look at this one. So I'm showing you this. It's a dangerous ground telling how great the competitors are. But the point is that, as I said earlier, this is happening. Suzy.com has had an enormous amount of funding. These are the kind of companies that are using it. These are the kinds of testimonials that clients are giving them. Luckily, I can also say a similar thing for Deepr. So these are testimonials that have come in. They're not words that we've written, they're words that the clients have written. So Diageo, we've used, this is sort of pack testing, concept testing, that sort of thing. Zenith, more exploratory research. What I missed out is that the lady there is saying when we're up against tight deadlines, which they always are, and working across multiple markets. And then Sackler, this is exactly her words. I didn't put these words in her mouth. She does say that it gives you a larger number of people than you can reach in online groups. So, you know, that might be a criticism. It's not my words, but this is what she said. So I'd say these are suggesting that there is demand. It's not just my imagination that there's demand for this. The Thornton and Ross is interesting because this is a lady there is a real traditional qual person and really did not want to use this method, but she ran out of time essentially and did, and was very happy, she said, to give this testimonial. So this is really, with this and Susie, it's just to show there is demand and we think it's here and it's going to grow. And that is it. The final question, I suppose, is where do you begin? If you're interested, how do you begin on this without taking up too much time and too much cost, too much of your resource? And I think that's something where, you know, potentially maybe a group of people could, ICGs could get together. We could do something very small scale with a very small sample. When we were developing this, that's what we did. In fact, that Tesco example, we did something very small scale with just half a dozen participants, just to really give you a feel of how long it takes, what you get out, what it costs, etc., without you having to spend a great deal of time. And that's it. So I will stop sharing, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was very, very interesting. We've got a couple of questions that have come through already in the chat box. I don't know if there's anybody else out there who's got questions that you'd like to ask, maybe by putting your webcams back on again. Anyway, first of all, let's read out these questions from Mike. What are the incentives when working with a panel? Is it pro rata on expected interview length, or do the participants get more or less than with a traditional questionnaire?
The short answer is that they essentially get the same incentives that they would get for doing quant. That's the basic level. However, we'll build in rest times and time for people to read or look at stimulus materials or read questions. So the interview length, the number of questions that participants would do within, say, a 10 or a 15-minute questionnaire might be less than they would do within the same length of quant. So it will be, there's less work involved. We can also give bonuses, and sometimes we'll do that if it's a tricky subject or quite a challenging subject. But essentially, the panels pay the incentives, and they normally will use the same model that they would use for quant.
Okay. Another question from Mike. Could you expand on your comment regarding cleaning the data using this approach, please?
Yeah. So what happens is that after each person has completed the questionnaire, we essentially go through their answers by hand, and we'll use our judgment as to whether they have answered, whether we think that they've fully engaged, or whether we think their answers are too anodyne or irrelevant, and that they haven't completed what we asked them to do. Essentially, we don't find many of these people, and that's because the software will check that their answers are relevant and are complete. So if we have an open-ended question, which is, you know, what was the last time you went to a restaurant and who did you go with, then if somebody's answers doesn't include any reference to who they went with, then the software will say, please make sure you do put in that information. We notice you haven't said that. So the cleaning can be quite limited because most answers are unless people have somehow managed to trick the system, most answers are relevant and complete. But we just use our judgment, and we will then, so that's a human eye does that and a human mind does that, and then we'll go back to the panel and say, we're not happy with these people. They either didn't give proper open-ended answers, or they fell into one of our traps, which we put in to identify people who weren't concentrating properly. And I should have said we put those in quite liberally. We're not doing that because we're against our participants. We're actually on their side. We try and make questionnaires engaging and entertaining if we possibly can, and make sense, etc. But we do need to make sure that people have actually read the questions properly, and they are who they say they are, and they meet all our criteria.
Okay, another question which, yeah, I was thinking of asking as well. So have you conducted this with any B2B audiences? And if so, do you have any learnings that you can share with us compared to consumer research using this approach?
Yes, we've done one B2B. That was with hairdressers and owners of hair salons. And we used a traditional recruiter for that. And so that was, what would be the learnings? The learnings for us were that we can't just throw away people, as we can do, not literally, as we can do with panels, if we're not happy with their answers. So when we did this, it was quite a nerve-wracking system, because we couldn't just go back and say we'll have another person and another, because we're not happy with their answers. So the learning for us there was that a great deal of time and planning needs to go into making sure that everybody's comfortable with the questionnaire, and that will make sense, and that we will get proper answers. And we did that, and it worked perfectly well. We got good answers from everybody. We told the participants exactly what to expect. We told them there's no, whilst there is a recruiter, that there's no moderator, and that that the interviews will take a certain amount of time. But other than that, there weren't any particular learnings. I suppose what we have found is that with B2B and consumer, that the quality of your answers is really down to, or the quality of the answers is down to the quality of the questions. If we get short answers, then that shows that we should have rephrased, and we wanted long ones, then we should have rephrased the questions. So that was our learning really with B2B, that we have to be extra careful about the planning the questionnaire or the discussion guide. I would say also the questionnaire is sort of more structured than traditional discussion guides, but less structured than traditional quant.
Okay, another question from Dennis this time. For people using existing online survey tools like Confirmit or Qualtrics, can the same technique apply with, e.g., your expert programming advice and support, or are Deepr and the others you listed better software for the hybrid approach?
I would say that, well, we use Questback, which is similar to Confirmit and Qualtrics, etc. I would say with some, I don't know is the honest answer. I would imagine this can be used with those other software tools. It would be, but we had to do quite a bit of programming. It wasn't us that did it. It was a programmer that we brought in. So we were able to create question types from scratch, essentially. So the answer is, I imagine this will be possible with those other methods, but there would be some preparation or discussion involved in being able to do it. Also, I'd say there's more to it than just the software. So the questionnaire design and the whole process, but the core of it is the software. And yes, I'd imagine it could be possible in those.
Okay, thank you. So that's all the questions we've got currently in the chat box. Has anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask Rich before we close this down? Yes, comment back from Dennis. Thanks, Richard. Very interesting.
Pleasure.
Any more questions from anyone? No, looks like you've answered everybody's questions, Rich. That was a really interesting insight into how you run those projects and your software. Just wondering whether you are able to offer ICG members a discount on the use of your software if people do want to try it. Maybe
Yes,
I'm
it's not.
bringing that upon you. Perhaps I should have asked that.
No, it's
Oh,
fine. It's fine. It's not software that ICG members would use. It's software that, excuse me, that we use when we're scripting their questionnaires. But yes, we're very happy to do that, and you know, probably be a case of study by study or project by project. I just, if I can, just mention a couple of things in my testimonials. Obviously, those were from end clients, so we have to do that because that shows that there is a demand at the end. But we do lots of work for where on a field and tab basis, whereby we are not doing the questionnaire design and we're not doing the analysis. We can help in those areas, but we're not actually doing those areas. We're literally just doing essentially the field work part or the interviewing part. So that was I suppose the main point I wanted to mention. And the other thing is just quality control. That's important, an important part of this. That I've done quant for a long time, and I've been going on and on and on. Anyone who would listen about quality control and the fact that it's critical to ensure that respondents really are engaging properly. And this came out of that work because literally one day it just occurred to me, well, why don't there are now sample providers that can provide sample of 10, 20, 30 people rather than hundreds or thousands. So why don't we try and do a study with a small sample size like that and with open-ended questions using the methods that we've already devised and which we use within Quant? And that's essentially where this came out of. And but the critical thing with all of this, it won't work with long questionnaires, with long grids, you know, with repetitive questionnaires. It's really got to be, the questionnaire itself is almost a sort of work of art to make this work.
okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Rich, for your time today and for putting together that presentation. Really interesting. I can't see any more questions coming through, just a couple of comments. Fascinating, thank you. Okay, so I think that's probably where we'll leave it for today. Any more questions, please send them to Rich. I'm sure he'd be very happy to answer. And thank you everybody for logging in today, and do join us again for one of our future ICG webinars or events. And otherwise, have a fantastic afternoon. Thanks again to Richard. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.